Did you know that you are wondrously made, loved into being, meaningful, purposeful? You are. I'll be right back. Hey there, Gracious Gang. It's Mike from thegraciousguest.org. The Gracious Guest Show is back, and we're really diving into some good stuff today. Some important stuff, some timely stuff. And so I can't wait to do that with you here, along with my friend Thomas Salerno, who's back in the guest chair today. But before we do that, please make sure that you subscribe to this YouTube channel, like this content, share this content far and wide. It really helps get the word out about the Gracious Guest. You know, everything I'm trying to do here to explore wonder and awe in everyday life. And it's something that you can do to really help, do that and sort of spread the word. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for tuning in here today. For those listening in the podcast, same thing. Make sure you like this, share this, promote this as best you can with anyone you think that might benefit from it. So I really appreciate that. It makes it possible for me to continue to do this. So, all right, we're going to dive in here today. I have my friend Thomas Salerno back. Thomas is a freelance writer. He's in New York. He is an author. He's got some very interesting stuff coming up he's going to share with you about here. But what caught my eye was an article that Thomas wrote recently for Word on Fire, Bishop Barron's apostolate. And the title is Wondrously Made, the Dobbs Decision and Our Cosmic Significance. So we're going to dig in a little bit to some of the issues behind what really got Thomas thinking about some of these themes, the meaning really of human life, the importance of these questions, and the dangers to considering this in a productive and sort of accurate and truthful and compelling way that are often posed by some of the cultural and societal challenges that we see today. Things like cancel culture, scientism, reductionism, a lot of the things that we take a look at on this show from time to time, or at least in the background. So I'm really excited to dig into yet another really interesting chat with Thomas that, not surprisingly, generated a few more ideas for completely quirky, sort of esoteric or eclectic further discussions I'm sure we're going to have in the future. So without further ado, let's jump in to my interview with my friend Thomas Salerno. Here we go. All right, Thomas Salerno, welcome back to the Gracious Guest Show.
Thank you, Mike. It's glad to be back where we're talking about yet another completely different topic from what we talked about last time.
Yep. That's right. We were having some tech difficulties, so we already said this earlier, but for those who have, like this redo here, we were just talking about how, so it was Ray Bradbury, then dinosaurs. Now we're getting a little more theological, philosophical, even touching on some stuff in the culture at large, broad worldview kind of stuff. So it's always a real pleasure. So I wanted to jump back to here quick though, and just share a little bit about what you have going on. I know there's a lot on your plate these days.
Yeah, I'm actually in the process of putting a book together. It's going to be called Baptizing the New Mythology. And what it is it's a collection of my pop culture essays from both Word on Fire's website and also Voyage Comics, where I get into the sort of Christian themes that we can discover in sci-fi, fantasy, and comic books. So that's been a
Cool.
cool experience as like a first time author to put
Yeah.
that together. And I'll also be writing a bit about human fossils and human evolution and its intersection with the Catholic faith for my pals at the Missio Dei Substack apostolate, because they'll be
Hmm.
putting a book about human origins and Adam and Eve sometime next year, hopefully.
That's good to know, because that's a topic of profound interest to a lot of people. And I know, like, when I teach here, just
Yes.
actually in a couple of weeks at the time of this recording, when we get into going through an Old Testament sort of survey with my ninth graders, and I I take them into a little consideration of some of the different ways that you could read that creation story, and with Adam and Eve, that are sometimes speculative, but I always, it's always coloring with
Mm-hmm.
inside the lines, so to speak. So I look forward to that for sure. Do you
Oh
guys
yeah,
get into? I'm just
absolutely. And that
curious. Oh, and I was just gonna ask if you can. I don't know if you can share this or not, but in general, I mean, do you get into questions that explore things like what role, if any, certain uh, pre-human ancestors, so to speak, may have played in some of the evolution
That's
and
actually,
genesis
yeah,
of
that's
kind of
actually the
Adam and Eve. I
focus
don't.
of, oh yeah, absolutely. That's the focus of my chapter, because
Okay, very cool.
I went to school and studied paleoanthropology at Stony Brook
Right.
University. So that's kind of my academic background. I'm not
Okay.
really going to get into a whole lot of the theological stuff. It's mostly like I'm presenting, here's what the fossil evidence shows. And then I kind
Right.
of want people to sort of make up their own minds based on the evidence.
Sure. Huh. Well, it's funny because I didn't even think about this ahead of time, but the this actually directly relates, I think,
Yes.
um, into what we're talking about today. For some reason, I didn't make that connection till right now. So, see, folks, this is why you should subscribe to this channel, because even I'm surprised sometimes by the cool stuff that comes out here. But we have, what the sort of context, if you will, for uh, us setting this up here today, and I'll just share with the viewers and listeners, was something you want to read for yourselves. I have it linked down below in the show notes, and that's Thomas's article here for Word on Fire. And it's and you write for them on a somewhat regular basis. I know. How long have you been doing that here for?
Just a little over 2 years, I think. I think my first
Okay.
article for them was July 2020.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so a
So
little over 2 years now.
So this one, yeah, this one's the title is "Wondrously Made: The Dobbs Decision and Our Cosmic Significance," and it's dated July 5th, 2022. So again, I've linked it, or you certainly Google it and find it. And I'm not going to spoil it here, but basically the setup here, and then I'll just turn it over to you. Just if I understand correctly here, is in the wake of course, the Dobbs versus Jackson's women health decision from the Supreme Court, which, among other things, basically demonstrated that the Supreme Court uh, really evaluated and admitted that their own decision in 1973's famous Roe versus Wade was a flawed decision. And that's there's a lot of confusion out there. There's a lot of misinformation floating around out there about what's really going on right now with all of this. It didn't make abortion illegal or anything like that, which those of us who are passionately pro-life hope to one day see truly all human beings, no matter how old or big or small they are, protected equally under the law. But that's not what this did. All this did was turn the issue back to the states to actually let democracy prevail. Actually, so now there's a lot of this going on. There's plenty of information out there. There's plenty of sort of legal and socio-political analysis. That's not what we're going to do here today. Why don't you just walk us through a little bit what you noticed specifically in the wake of that decision and this sort of discussion about these issues online?
Yeah, because of my background in going to school to study anthropology, I still follow a lot of anthropologists and paleontologists on Twitter.
Hmm.
And in the wake of the decision, I started to see a lot of lockstep in terms of this narrative, not just among anthropologists, but among natural scientists in general, that was very much dogmatically pro abortion
Hmm.
and really insisted that a human fetus is a non person and has no rights.
Hmm.
And I was just a bit disturbed by this, by the seeming, lockstep sort of that there was very little
Certainty,
variance. Yeah, there
right?
was a
Yeah.
lot of certainty and very little variance in the opinion. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
I did see, some people who did try to speak out in the scientific realm of kind of opposing this were sort of put down and like marginalized. And it was just,
Hmm.
it really disturbed me. And I just started
Sure.
musing about like what sort of philosophical worldview kind of undergirds this assumption that the human
Right.
fetus is a non-person and has no rights. Because at first I'm like, well, maybe it's just progressive political ideology, but
Hmm.
that explanation, it didn't seem like a full explanation. So I started wondering about what
And
deeper
if I
sort
made
of,
it, I
yeah.
remember the what comes to mind when you say that before I forget is just I forget there's that saying you hear sometimes that politics is downstream from culture. So
Right.
that is that kind of this, what
Absolutely.
you're getting at there, the idea that, there is definitely a very big political aspect to this, but that's not where it starts. it's it
Precisely.
starts with a deeper kind of cultural milieu that's coming,
Right.
that's expressing. Okay, that makes sense.
That philosophical ideas matter, and they will
Right.
inform political decision making, and even
Sure.
what ordinary people accept as just, you know givens in society. And I just started musing about where this kind of comes from. I ultimately sort of came to the conclusion that it has a lot to do with scientism, right? This idea
Hmm.
that science is the only legitimate the only legitimate methodology of knowing, which is ironically
Right.
not a scientific premise, that's a
Right.
philosophical presupposition.
It's not scientifically verifiable,
Viable, right? Yeah, but
which
this
is ironic.
idea, yeah, this idea that there's no transcendent, there's no sort, and
Yeah.
if there's no transcendent dimension to the human person,
Hmm.
then of course, like individual human life then has no sort of intrinsic value. This idea that all living things are just, I think I call it in the article, the transient epiphenomenon of mindless physics and chemistry, you know
Great phrase, by the
right?
way.
Yeah.
It's right. Well, but true, because there's no, yeah, there's no sort of ground floor that we all stand on. It's just one will versus another. But well, I almost, even before that,
Hmm.
it's just it's like the bumper stickers. Stuff happens.
Stuff happens, yeah.
Um, I won't quote it precisely because it's, for family reasons. No, but um. So what? So maybe let's dig in here a little bit. Where do you think that scientism, as you see it, really kind of becomes so, you know, ingrained, or where does it really, kind of start to work its way into more of a almost subconscious kind of social, assumption?
Right, like, and the problem is it's been doing that for a long time, right? Really, since the scientific revolution in the late, 1500s, early 1600s and beyond, you have this idea that thinkers in that period started to consider the human body as basically a machine, as like a machine, because more
Mm,
complicated machines like windmills and those really complicated clocks that they made at that time were like all the rage, right? So they're like, well, maybe this is the way
right.
the human body works. And they started to move away from the sort of classical, pre-Christian, like Greco-Roman ideas about the human body, which included a
Hmm.
lot of, like, mystical, the four humors, all of that stuff. And they
Right.
started to think,
Well, and I feel like intended to be more an integrated view,
yes,
correct? I mean, just as far as,
an integrated
yeah,
body and spirit, which the church
right,
defines as like the human person is a body soul composite. Like, you are a
right.
soul, you have a body for now, and you will have a body again, we believe, at the resurrection. But in the
Hmm.
scientific revolution, they started to think, well, can we explain everything about the human body in terms of mechanical processes, and completely naturalistic,
Mm,
without regard to anything supernatural, without invoking any supernatural ideas? And I think that comes to its sort of fruition in the 1800s. Like, you finally have,
hmm.
ideas where, you have Charles Darwin coming up, where he finally puts forth this idea that, like, we can explain the human body completely naturally in terms of evolutionary processes, right? We don't need to invoke miracles of any kind, or even sort of, we can take God's providence completely out of the equation. It's a completely
Mm,
naturalistic, almost deterministic process, just based on, coming
right.
out of physics and chemistry, you know. And I think that those
Right.
sort of assumptions have become ingrained in a lot of the way you hear science presented to people on a popular level through, people like Bill
Right.
Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson, the
Neil
people,
deGrasse
yeah, the
Tyson.
people
Yeah.
who are the big popularizers of science take this as a given, that
Right.
there is no supernatural and everything can be explained mechanistically.
Right. And it always bothers me because the way a lot of them proceed is just, and I don't want to speak ill of
Mm-hmm.
anybody, but it tends toward a very oftentimes arrogant, dismissive, you know, um, attitude that to me, I mean, it seems very lock and step oftentimes with the kind of cancel culture. So yeah, I think it really kind of fuels it seems to really fuel the cancel culture mentality where if you don't have this sort of approved, it's like you said, very dogmatic.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically enough, you don't have the right, opinion, we're just going to delete you out of conversation
Right.
altogether. So I
And that's what I was
I don't
seeing.
know what you have to say about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
yeah,
I was seeing in the wake of this Supreme Court decision. That just really disturbed me. That I'm like, there's this sort of shutting down of inquiry into anything that even a whiff of the supernatural, or that we are more than just biological phenomenon. You know,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
think that's such an impoverished view of the world. I think we spoke about this when we were talking about the fiction of Ray Bradbury, that even the most
Right.
mundane things seem to have this really unexplainable, transcendent quality to them. That if
Yeah.
you just stop and meditate on the natural world, you know, just it should really humble us. I think probably around the time, hopefully, that this recording goes up, I'm going to have a follow-up piece coming up on Word on Fire where I explore this idea
Hmm.
more in terms of the Webb telescope images,
Ah, okay.
because of just like like everyone with an internet connection, when we saw those images, it just blew us away. And like the argument that no, there's nothing transcendent in the universe. And I'm like, those images really speak for themselves, that it's not, that creation is not simply what we observe at face value, right? That there is something deep and ineffable and almost unexplainable that sort of underlies the whole natural world. And I think
Yeah.
Darwin himself understood this, because what he definitely gets right, I believe, is that creation
Hmm.
is an unfolding process. It's not static.
Yeah.
It's not simply God creates the world in 6 days and then nothing else happens. Whereas
Hmm.
Darwin understands, no, that the universe is an unfolding process and beauty can be found there. One of the last lines of his Origin of the Species, he says, endless forms most beautiful are being evolved.
Hmm.
And I think we can see from at basically every level of creation, whether it's cosmic expansion, of the universe, whether it's the transformation of a caterpillar into a moth, or whether it's the development of a human being in utero, we can see that
Hmm.
creation is an unfolding, developing process. And I believe that should
Right.
just, the beauty of that should humble us.
Well, and it's something that again, like we were talking about earlier, like you could have a whole, and there's plenty of them out there, and this conversation's just really getting started, post Dobbs of, you know, what are the unborn?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to. This particular show right now isn't specifically about that, but I really encourage anyone watching or listening to this, check out. I call him my friend. Uh, I don't know if we had some correspondence. I don't know if Trent would call myself his friend, but Trent Horn of Catholic Answers Live, or Catholic Answers, I should say. He's on Catholic Answers Live sometimes. But Trent has a podcast, The Council of Trent. Trent has not paid me to mention this. I'm just plugging this. He does some work with SQPN as well, which Thomas and I both help out with. But Trent is really good at exploring in a very thoughtful, very direct and simple to understand way how to have a rational discussion about the question of what a developing human is.
Right.
And I think he does a good job too of showing, and we all have to get better at this. Like we said earlier, everything is so politicized, and everybody has skin in this game one way or the other.
Hmm.
Um, I'm afraid far too often it's just platitudes. It's pre-programmed narrative. All the buzzwords, phrases like abortion as termination of a pregnancy. Like there's all
Yes.
these phrases, but it's like, how often do you hear someone say, "But what is a pregnancy?"
Right. Yeah.
What is, like, I'm pro-choice, I'm pro, well, what does that mean? Or you'll see people that subscribe to the sort of beliefs that we do about a lot of this stuff described as like anti-abortion activists,
Hmm.
because quite frankly, and I spent a lot of time working in the army in messaging and in
Yes. Yeah.
psychological operations, and that's all that's going on all the time. That's just human nature, right? Like we are drawn to be part of a narrative,
Yes.
and I firmly believe everybody is inescapably attracted one way or the other to narratives, because you want this is and this I'm circling back here. To me, that itself is is proof, I would say, maybe not proof, it's certainly evidence against a purely mechanistic, everything's just chemical reactions. Really? Then why are we all inescapably drawn to find some meaning in a story that makes sense of everything?
I'm glad
And I
you
don't
hit
care
on
what you
this.
believe.
Yeah.
So I want to bring this up. Like, I just the fact, like the Ray Bradbury stories, like it's all connected. Where like he talks about mundane things, but I just was thinking, just story itself. I don't care how good or bad the story is. Story implies connection, meaning, something beyond what the story is saying. Like,
Yes.
how could that be possible if this is just a machine? That doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
So long-winded
Absolutely.
question for you to tee you up there, but
No.
yeah,
Yeah. And that's perfect um, because creation is a process. It basically is a narrative. It's this unfolding process. It is a narrative. It is a story. The universe, we can, cosmologists know through like the Big Bang, the universe had a beginning, what, like 13.7 billion years ago. And it's been this unfolding process, this
mm-hmm.
unfolding story for 13 billion years. And I think what we
Right.
from the Christian tradition have to say to that is that that's true. And in this unfolding drama of creation, we are not bit players.
Right.
there's this idea among people who
Right.
subscribe to scientism that at the very best we have walk-on parts. We just come in, maybe say a
Mm-hmm.
line or two, and then fade into the background. We're never seen again. There's nothing after that. you know Whereas we as Christians would say, no, we have this eternal destiny, right? Because we have this
Mm-hmm.
non-physical, this trans-physical element to us, which we call a soul, that is made, we believe, in the image and likeness of our Creator, the one who's put this whole drama together. If we're in the image of
Yeah.
of the supreme dramatist, we're not bit players in his
Right.
drama.
Nope.
He has crafted a role for each and every one of us, and that's why I
Yeah.
stressed in the article that idea of cosmic significance, that the universe, the
Right.
cosmos, would be poorer if you were absent. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing is it's so easy to. I'm just bringing up an etymology here. I want to check. It's so easy to look at, and again, like we're saying, like you could do this with pretty much any hot button issue, so to speak. You can look at all the gender ideology stuff. You could look at, I mean, if you if you really wanted to dance around possibly getting flagged on YouTube or something like that. Like, in fact,
Right.
my brother was just teasing me the other day. Like, it didn't have anything to do with what we were talking about. We were talking about the Peshtigo fire and Our Lady of Good Help out in Wisconsin in the 1800s, and it was a really interesting discussion. But before we're going on, he said, I said, so what do you want to talk about? He's like, I don't know. He goes, it's just one of my goals in life is to get you kicked off YouTube. It's like, why would you do that? Why would you even joke about that? But I mean, but again, like we said before about the whole cancel culture reality, and the challenge of that is I feel like it's this perfect storm where you have, like you said, this worldview that is this, secular Darwinism, this reductionistic kind
Right.
of worldview in play. It's like this perfect cocktail mixed with a climate where you can bully people. And I'm sorry, that's what it is.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
can bully people. You can, it's call it mild if you want, but if a good working definition of terrorism is to apply fear, you know, uh, to basically shut somebody down or to sort of coerce someone into something they wouldn't do without that. I'm not going to call it terrorism, but the point is, it's not good. It's
Right.
bullying. It's not Christian, certainly, but I think even if you're not a Christian, um, it's important, I think, for us to be able to tap the brakes and to try to rediscover a way to have an informed conversation, from the heart and from the mind
Yes.
about things like this. And it seems to me that that's just really something we're really missing right now.
It shuts down free inquiry, and that's what the problem, where they're not
Mm,
even, they don't even want these questions to be raised, they don't even want these questions to be discussed, because they view it in a way as somehow violence is being done to them by you even raising these questions. And that is
mm,
not going to be good, certainly for, the democratic principles that we uphold as Americans, but it's
right,
not good for the
right,
scientific process either. The scientific process kind of relies
yeah,
on this open inquiry. I mean,
right,
just look at how the way science was conducted in the Soviet Union or Hitler's Germany. And you can see that
right,
once you, those are extreme examples, but the point is that once you take away that free inquiry and you can't come to any conclusions that contradict the party line, the official
right,
narrative,
the narrative,
science
right,
really constricts. Like, I mean, there's a reason why the Allies won World War II with their science. Whether
hmm,
and it's a whole debate about whether we won the war with science was good or bad. Because we developed the
right,
horrible weapons of the atomic bomb. But the point is that in the West, they were able to
hmm,
conduct science in a way that was free and open, and still is
hmm,
to like some degree. The problem is that once you start saying these questions, because they involve the supernatural, are out of bounds completely. Now, yeah,
right,
it's like, obviously you can't prove the existence of God with science, and it's unscientific to simply say a miracle happened. Like, because there's nothing
hmm,
science is not equipped to deal with the idea of miracles. That's where faith comes in. I
right,
mean, I love how i
yeah,
i believe it's John Paul II, correct, who famously says faith and reason are two wings, where the
right,
human spirit
right,
rises to the contemplation of the truth. Where, see, like,
yeah,
science is not equipped to deal with the sort of questions that faith is dealing with. But the problem I see is that a lot of scientists then seem to say, well, if our method is not equipped to deal with it, it must not be important at all. We can just
right,
reject
which
it
just
out of
which
hand.
just doesn't follow. It's not a scientifically verifiable assumption,
Right.
or claim, or and it's just funny to me because there's a great book. I have it up on the shelf over here. I've heard it. It's the author's A.G. I've heard it pronounced Sertalange or Sertalange. It's Ges is the end. It's a French name. The Dominican priest. He wrote this book, The Intellectual Life, in I think 1920, and republished it in 1921 or 22. So I mean, it's 100 years
Hmm.
old, and it's just a incredible read. I'll put a link to it in the show notes too, for what it's worth. But it's a book about, basically, a very rigorous book on how our mind works and how to nourish it and how to learn and how to memorize and how to why you should sleep well. Like, it's a really just interesting book. It's hard to describe in just a short little elevator pitch, but he's discussing in there, this chapter I'm on right now, a great, sort of depiction and discussion of scientific inquiry, scientific knowledge as knowledge through causes.
Yes. Yeah.
I think what a great, I mean, it's and the way he goes about it, like, he shows he obviously doesn't subscribe to a reductionist attitude, but it's amazing how he's more open-minded than a lot of people, I feel like, who might paint themselves as open-minded, supposedly in this day and age, because he's showing how, the scientific method, the scientific way of knowing is wonderful, but it's not all there is.
No,
And
yeah.
it can't prove, and it doesn't, when it's done right, it doesn't dare claim that it's the only way to know anything. This
Right.
is really like what we seem to have stumbled into is basically a new kind of religion, not a new
Right.
scientific sort of. So that's, I know Bishop Barron talks about that a lot. The idea of scientism is making it, making quite a few religious claims and dogmatic sort of philosophical or theological claims disguised as science, which it's really not.
Right. And it's interesting, right? Because at the same time, they also seem to want to reduce the human person and really all phenomenon to what Aristotle would call their material and efficient causes, right? What's
Yeah.
something made of and
Hmm.
what immediately caused it. But
Hmm.
by doing that, you're completely leaving out the final cause of something. What is something's
Yeah.
ultimate origin and where is it going? What was
Right.
it made for? And as
Hmm.
Christians, that's something we can.
And not like a utilitarian way,
No.
but like,
Yeah.
that would be more, maybe, would that be more like the efficient cause, or at least connected with that, versus the final cause being something's destiny, its
Right.
purpose, why it is good that it
Right. Its
exists.
ultimate purpose, that
Yeah.
it's good that it exists, that it would be less good if it did not exist. And I think
Right.
when Christianity and a lot of other world religions too bring this whole idea that like the the human person, every single human person, not just humanity in the mass, but that every single human life is good and necessary, and that you have like a
Hmm.
deep purpose to your life. There is a reason why you are here. I feel like that is a much more fulfilling and ultimately joyful way to look at the world. Like, and when we
Yeah.
lose that, we really,
And
and
true.
true to boot. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
And
we,
actually
true.
true and real.
I think we really risk when we lose that. We risk, like you said, everything become about utilitarian usefulness. And that can sort of drive
Yeah.
these ideas. Well, if a pregnancy is unplanned, that person, like they don't even view them as a person. They just view as like
Right.
an inconvenient state of affairs
Yeah.
that needs to be, done away with.
Well, and I think I'm sure, I know you're in the same boat too, but I can just speak for myself. Like, I'm not judging anybody. I'm not
No.
making light of anybody's horrible, challenging, heartbreaking kind of decision-making process. I'm not denigrating women who find themselves in really tough circumstances.
No,
I'm
not at
not
all.
excusing the men who get these women in these situations and then split and aren't around. Everybody, this is a very serious, very, very troubling situation. Okay. Um, but what I love, and this is why I brought up Trent earlier, is we have it's like we have to make the effort here to say, look, what is an unborn person? Like, what is a pregnancy?
Right.
Because the fact is, if it's a human being who deserves the same treatment under the law that I do, certain things have to be off the table. And it might make things, but it's like there's just some lines we must not cross,
Right.
because of the implications that they have. So, and I think that's something that we're going to all learn within this particular,
Right.
sort of issue,
And that
to
person
discuss more.
was meant to be here in
Yeah.
ways that we can't
Yeah.
fully understand because we don't know it all. But even in,
Right.
in just awful situations where sometimes a pregnancy can happen, still that life
Hmm.
was in some mysterious way meant to be here, and the universe will be
Hmm.
poorer and not as well off with if that person just doesn't exist. you know
I've brought up before, this is something I haven't heard brought up before, but looking at the Old Testament, and you look at the whole story of Abraham and Sarah, and the drama that ensues when
Right.
Sarah comes up with the idea for Abraham to, sleep with her maid Hagar, to sort of kickstart this promise from God to give Abraham a descendant. It's them coming up with their own way, and it just leads to all this chaos, of course, and it's a huge mess. Um, and that story goes on for chapters. There's all sorts of weird, disturbing things in there that are hard to
Yeah.
talk about, be like, why this is in the Bible, yikes, I was thinking about it one day. Why the wait?
Yeah.
Like years and years and years in the story. And again, we won't get into whether or not how literal some of that is, but years and years and years and years and years for this promise, years and years and years. And then it's years after Ishmael's born to that union. Still many more years. I think 13 more years till Isaac is eventually conceived. And I was thinking about it when I was reading a few chapters later, the relatively quick section after that of the story of Isaac and Rebekah, because there's a lot of focus on Abraham and Sarah. There's a lot of focus on his grandson, right, Jacob, and the
Yeah.
12 tribes. But Isaac and Rebekah kind of it's not as long. So I think you usually just kind of read through it quicker.
Mm.
And it occurred to me reading like the beautiful story of their first meeting, and Rebekah alighting from her camel and running to see Isaac, this love story. I was like, in prayer one day, it just occurred to me, just a thought, all of that, why God, why this, all these details, why this wait, could it possibly be sufficient enough for that delay to have had something to do with Isaac and Rebekah being close enough in age to get married?
Yeah.
Like, if that's the only reason, if the only reason that the promise to Abraham that he would have a son, he and Sarah, his wife, would have a son, if the only reason was that it would be long enough so that the ages would line up better between Isaac and Rebekah for the story to continue, isn't that sufficient reason enough? And it just hit me. I was like, it's so simple. And I don't know if that's the reason, but here's the thing. There might be 50 other reasons. There might be a million reasons that we don't know. Tiny little things you can't possibly begin to comprehend. And that's my whole thing, is I just feel like the scientistic reductionistic attitude is like fundamentally snobbish
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just shuts the door. It's so close-minded,
And
masquerading
that's
as open-minded. I mean,
yeah, that's
come on.
exactly what motivated
There's no
me to write
imagination.
this.
You know?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what motivated me to write this piece, was just the arrogant certainty of it, And
Yeah.
I'm not judging anybody here,
No.
but to me it just rubbed me the wrong way. And as a writer, that's sometimes the best headspace to be in, when something rubs you the wrong way, because then
Yeah.
when you write about it, you're really passionate and into it, not getting
Yeah.
into polemics or anything like that, but just
Well, you
that you're
take it out on the page, not out on other people.
right. Yeah, but it's
Right?
just like, like I'm passionate about this topic just because, like, I saw the injustice of it, and I'm like, somebody from this perspective, from this academic background, should give voice to an opposing point of view here,
Yeah.
because I just saw it as way too lockstep, and I think it gave a false impression too, that it is totally and absolutely lockstep, because
Right.
I think scientists do themselves a disservice these days when they present to the public this idea that science is like a credo. It's like a set of
Yeah.
beliefs that you hold to, which is not how I was taught science works. In science,
It's not
knowledge
how Newton
is
was taught either.
no
Or
in
Einstein, or yeah.
yeah, knowledge is provisional. It's
Mm-hmm.
always dependent on new data,
Yeah.
new discoveries. But to just close off all debate and say, nope, this subject is closed, we are no longer going to do any more thinking about it, I'm like, that is the exact opposite of the scientific method, and of
Mm-hmm.
just, it kills curiosity about
Yeah.
life and the universe. And I think once, if science loses that sense of curiosity, if scientists lose that sense of wonder at the universe,
Mm-hmm.
they are going to find quickly that science is going to devolve into just, I fear, just this tool for other non-scientists to implement
Mm-hmm.
policies and just sort of couch them under a scientific veneer to give them respectability and
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I know we're up against sort of our time here, but if I may, I'll just quote this and see what you might have to say here, just in terms of this wonderful little phrase, that was right at the front of your article, at the beginning of your title here. So this is from Psalm 139. This is verses 13 to 16, and verse 14 is where that part of the title came from. You formed my inmost being. You knit me in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am wonderfully made. And this, some translations are, I'm wondrously made, or fearfully and wonderfully made, too, you see sometimes.
Mm,
Wonderful are your works. My very self you know. My bones are not hidden from you. When I was being made in secret, fashioned in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw me unformed. In your book all were written down. My days were shaped before one came to be. And not to be deterministic, it's not like we don't have free will. Of course we do. But
right.
this idea that, like you said, and I'll just kick it back over to you for your final thoughts here on that idea of meaning and narrative and purpose, and your the totality of who we are, is way beyond some, you know mechanistic process.
Yeah, absolutely. As Christians, we believe that we were loved and known before the universe was made. Before a single star came into being, before the Big Bang itself, you were known and loved by God. And the process, even just the process used to form our bodies, because we're not Gnostics. We believe the body is good,
Right.
and we can know that just from looking at creation, that the way he forms the human body out of the matter of the universe, like I quote in the article, Carl Sagan, an agnostic, kind of had it right. He said we are all star stuff.
Hmm.
The atoms in our body were formed in the cores of exploding stars. just to just
Just
think
like
about
kyber
that.
crystals.
Just
Sorry.
like kyber crystals,
I gotta
exactly.
gotta
Star
get I
Wars,
gotta get a Star Wars reference in here somewhere.
it's in
Sorry, go
there.
ahead.
No, but yeah, but
Yeah.
just to think about these ideas should give us just a profound humility and respect for all human beings. We are not just dumb matter. We are star stuff, and in a spiritual way, we in we are created in the image and likeness of the creator, unlike certainly any other beings on this planet. There may be ones on other planets who are our brothers and sisters that we don't know about, but certainly on.
We'll do something on that in the future, I think.
Oh yeah, we will. But
Got to
but
keep the eclectic thing going, right?
absolutely. But certainly on this planet, we have a special relationship with the creator of the entire universe. And yeah, I'm just going to stress again, that just move us to humility, not arrogance.
Amen. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for coming back again. And I've been jotting down, and like I just said one there too. There's usually two or three seed ideas for a future show that are not just like part two or part three of the existing conversation that come out of these things. So I really appreciate
Yeah.
it. Look forward to it.
Well, thank you,
All right.
Mike. It's been awesome to explore these topics, and I'm certain we'll speak again about
Yeah.
all these just amazing ideas that sort of roll out of our chats here.
Amen. Hey, God bless. We'll see ya.
God bless you, Mike. Thank you.
And what a joy that really was. And like we said, there's, to be sure, very serious, very sensitive, very troubling, very often unimaginably difficult um, issues in play here for a lot of people. And, truth be told, like there's a lot that I haven't had to suffer in my life. There's a lot of other things I have had to suffer that many of you haven't, okay? And so I think that's just maybe a closing word here, for us to be encouraging and to recognize that this false dichotomy that's floating out there, this idea that, you're either a truly sensitive a person who cares about the heart, who cares about relationships, who cares about people, or you're some, close-minded, pro-lifer who judges people. That's just not true. It's just completely not true. It's part of that narrative we talked about. And the bottom line is, I think we would all benefit. Well, I know we would all benefit from more kindness in the world, more love in the world. We would all benefit from more truth from less fear, more ability, and more freedom to be able to have an actual informed conversation precisely about things that are difficult and challenging and aren't easy to talk about. So at any rate, thank you so much for tuning in today. Please share with me your thoughts on this. Feel free to comment below. Again, like this video, subscribe, share it far and wide, the podcast as well. Check out thegraciousguest.org. I really want to push the website and plug the website. You can get in touch with me directly there in my contact form on the bottom of the splash page. You can find old shows, not old shows. You can find shows that are ever ancient and ever new, to quote my old show that I used to host years ago. Topics of enduring interest, hopefully, for you. And I really welcome your feedback, your recommendations, suggestions. Other people that might want to sit down and chat. I can't interview everybody. I do get interview requests from time to time, which is pretty cool. Sometimes it's something that it's just not really my flavor, or it's not something I think is really what I want to focus this show on. Sometimes it is, and it surprises me because I hadn't thought of it before at all. So feel free to share. I try to get back to everybody as quickly as I can, and God bless you guys for stopping by today. So take care, and until next time, don't forget to wonder. God bless you.